Top 20 Cashier Interview Questions and Answers. Companies want cashiers who are good with both money and people. Therefore, when you attend an interview, you must highlight your focus on customer service regardless of the field. This article put together 20 top interview questions and answers for the post of cashier. I hope that these will help you prepare well for an interview. 1. Why are you interested in this role? This is one of the most common questions in all interviewers. You can either treat it as an assessment of your motives or as a chance to sell yourself. Tip number 1. Whatever way you interpret it, ensure that you sell yourself. Tip number 2. Your reason should not be for material gain. Sample answer. I have been a cashier for the last 10 years, and therefore believe that I am qualified for this job. I have excellent money handling and interpersonal skills, which I can use to ensure your institution's continued success. 2. What are the roles of a cashier? You must know the job description of the position that you applied for. The interviewer expects that you understand your roles in the given place of work. Tip number 1. Ensure that you know the job description. Tip number 2. You can list the roles of cashiers in the given organization. Sample answer. A cashier offers positive customer experience through fair and courteous services. He or she resolves customer issues and answers all the related questions. Other roles include processing return transactions and sale registration. 3. What are the qualities that a cashier needs to be effective? You have to know what it takes to be a good cashier. Tip number 1. You can answer this by thinking about the qualities that have made you become who you are. Tip number 2. Ensure that the qualities are job-specific. Sample answer. A cashier should be an excellent communicator to serve customers well. He or she should be friendly and approachable. He should also be logical, understanding, accurate and quick to learn. 4. What significant challenges did you face during your last role, and how did you handle it? All organizations want employees who are problem solvers. Your value is pegged on how good you can handle problems that come along the way. Tip number 1. Choose challenges that were not a result of your own doing. Tip number 2. Clearly outline how you handle these challenges. Sample answer. During my last role, my main challenge was dealing with the customers since most of the people in the retail store that I worked in were quite illiterate. Some of the customers also lost their cool fast, screaming and raising their voices. As a cashier, I used to calm them down and explain things such as discounts bit by bit, which immensely helped. 5. Describe your daily routine as a cashier. This is a straightforward question. It would be best to tell the interviewer what you used to do daily during your last role. Tip number 1. All the activities should be job-related. Tip number 2. Do not include activities that may ruin your chances. Sample answer. My day revolves around sitting on my desk and receiving payments. I issue receipts, refunds, credits and change due to customers. I also assist customers by giving them the information that they need and resolve their complaints. 6. Briefly describe your experience. The interviewer is not asking about your experience in the CV. He or she wants to know some of the things you have learned to do over the years. Tip number 1. You can mention some of the things you have learned in your previous workplaces. Tip number 2. You can talk about the experiences that have made your work easier. Sample answer. I have extensive experience in handling. You can mention the accounts and payments, which I obtained when working at, mention the place of work. 7. What kind of strategies and mindset is required for this role? It would help if you had a strategy and the right mindset to execute specific roles successfully. Tip number 1. Ensure that the strategy and role are job-specific. Tip number 2. You can give examples to support your answers. Sample answer. A successful cashier needs a focused mindset. Dealing with cash is usually stressful and predisposes one to several mistakes that need to be avoided. When coming up with a strategy, make sure that you are focused on customer service and accuracy. 8. What is the biggest challenge that you foresee in this role? Interviewers usually assume that you have already pictured the job in mind and seen some of the areas that may be challenging. Tip number 1. Look at the place of work keenly and identify some of the things that may be problematic. Tip number 2. You can assure the interviewer that you are willing to work to handle any challenge that may come up. Sample answers. I do not think that this job has a challenge that is strange to other accounting jobs. I believe that I am in a position to handle anything that comes my way using my former experience. 9. How do you stay motivated at work? Being a cashier can be stressful. You, therefore, need something that pushes you to keep going. Tip number 1. Your motivation should not be material. Tip number 2. Answer this question wisely. Sample answer. My primary motivation is getting positive results from customers. Every time I help a customer, and he or she appreciates and even does the right thing, I feel good and get the urge to keep going. 10. Describe a time when you failed in this role and the lesson you learned. This is not a trap as one might think. This interviewer wants to know whether you are accountable. Can you admit to failure? Tip number 1. Talk about an experience that is not entirely your fault to be safe. Tip number 2. You can twist this around if you have never been employed. Sample answer. This is my first attempt. I haven't worked anywhere before. However, while in my final year of accounting, I failed to take a unit earnestly believing that it was easy and got very low marks. I realized that I should never take anything for granted. 11. Tell us about a time when you went above and beyond to help a customer. Just like we mentioned in the introduction, customer service and satisfaction are essential requirements in this line of duty. The interviewer wants to know how good you are in handling customers. Tip number 1. Highlight your focus on customer service. Tip number 2. Your experience needs to feel real. Sample answer. I worked in the back room during my last role. Once I was going through the inventory with a lot of work still pending, a customer called asking for a specific product. Since all the sales representatives were helping out other customers, I took the customer to the exact location of the item, halting my work. It may have been inconvenient, but I believe that customer interests come first. 12. How do you deal with stress? You should know that this position requires someone who is both physically and emotionally able. How you deal with stress will also tell the interviewer how competent you will be when offered the job. Tip number 1. Your attention should be on the job. Tip number 2. Do not talk about indulgences, such as smoking or drinking. Sample answer. This position can, indeed, get stressful at times. My primary strategy of dealing with stress is focusing on the parts of the job that are easy to control. I channel all my energy to these parts, ignoring those that are out of my control. 13. How will you ensure both accuracy and speed? This position requires attention to details since it involves money and accounts. Cashiers also have to be highly efficient. Tip number 1. You can talk about some of the things that make you accurate, such as your experience. Tip number 2. Your answer should be convincing. Sample answer. I have worked as a cashier for some time now, so I have sharpened my performance. I always focus entirely on the task at hand to ensure accuracy. To avoid daydreaming, I cheerfully interact with customers and keep things moving quite fast. 14. Describe when you used your communication to resolve a conflict. Communication is essential when it comes to a cashier position. The interviewer is assessing if you are a good communicator. Tip number 1. Your experience should be job-related. Tip number 2. Ensure that you shed light on your excellent communication skills. Sample answer. While working in a supermarket, I dealt with an agitated customer who did not get the discount she had in mind. I explained that the discount only applied to a given quantity to calm her down, but she started screaming that I was trying to steal from her. I listened to her and then thoroughly explained how it worked and suggested that she adds more items to qualify. She understood and apologized. 15. What do you believe when handling cash and charge cards? The interviewer is questioning your integrity and honesty, which are pivotal in this position. Tip number 1. Convince the interviewer that he or she can trust you. Tip number 2. Explain why honesty is important. Sample answer. I need to treat other people and their possessions with respect. As an employee of any given company, I am supposed to protect both the company's possessions and assets. I cannot, therefore, choose personal gain over integrity. 16. Can you comfortably check kids for alcohol and tobacco? Employers want cashiers who know the law. Federal law is very strict with the sale of these two substances and identification of those who buy them. This is a serious duty that can result in serious repercussions. Tip number 1. Be honest. However, keep in mind that saying no may cost you the job. Tip number 2. You can say if you have done this in your previous workplaces. Sample answer. Yes, I am. When I was a supermarket attendant for 4 years, I did that and therefore believe that I am up to the task. 17. How flexible is your schedule? Employers want employees who are willing to stretch themselves. You may need to pick extra hours if an employee calls sick, which cannot happen if your schedule is ever tight. Tip number 1. Be open about what works for you regarding the day of week, time and shift length. Tip number 2. Tell the interviewer if you are flexible. Sample answers. My schedule is never tight, so I believe that I am quite flexible and can adapt to anything that comes along the way. 18. What does customer service mean to you? Customer service is integral when it comes to this position. Remember that you are a reflection of the company to customers. Tip number 1. You can describe exactly how you want to be treated as a customer when answering this question. Tip number 2. Be as straightforward as possible. Sample answer. Customer service means keeping a smile, greeting everyone warmly and offering assistance when necessary. It also means customer satisfaction. 19. How are you with handling money? Your job as a cashier mainly involves handling money. The interviewer can either be assessing your integrity, experience or trustworthiness. Tip number 1. You can highlight your experience in managing money. Tip number 2. Highlight that you are honest and accurate. You can mention that you are familiar with the given technologies. Sample answer. I believe that I have excellent money handling skills since, in the last 10 years that I have been a cashier, I have never experienced a short. I am also familiar with several retail technologies such as barcode scanners and credit card readers, making handling money relatively easy. 20. Do you prefer working alone or with a team? Cashiers mostly work alone. However, one still needs a team in given instances. You have to work closely with stockers and store managers in the course of your operation. Tip number 1. Stress that you can work independently and thrive. Tip number 2. Show that you can also work with a team. Sample answer. I do not mind working alone. However, I appreciate the support and expertise that a team can offer. I have superb communication and interpersonal skills that can help me work well with a team.